Hello, hi, and welcome to... Oh, no, that's the problem. Okay. Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of The Emma Gunn Show and a midweek instalment of Bullet Points. Now, I am going to say something that if I think about it too much, I'm not going to say. I wonder if that makes sense. Because I was thinking about this episode of Bullet Points, and I was thinking about a few conversations that I've had in the last few days, funnily, and I always think, I don't know, working in magazines and newspapers, three's a trend. So if a topic, conversation, anything like that comes up 3 times, you think, I'm going to unpick that. And then just before I started recording, I was chatting to the lovely Evie Whitehead, who is a nutritionist. You might have heard me talk about her podcast on this podcast. Anyway, we connected via Zoom, which was absolutely lovely because she messaged me and said, look, you've said really nice things about my podcast. I would love to just connect. We did a Zoom. Mea culpa. I'm having a morning. I had forgotten that we had the Zoom in. And in a bid to be wildly efficient today, I've had lots of things in my to-do list in my head, and I have been running around. But I've been doing that thing where I've been pulling things and being like throwing things around and acting very quickly. Basically, the kind of thing that when you were a kid, someone would say, more haste, less speed. And I have just decided to decompress and take a moment and record this episode. But the thing that came up was somebody asked me when I was out in London at appointments the other day. They were like, oh, it's a real shame you don't interview experts anymore on your podcast. I really like the direction it's going in, but I do miss hearing you talk to people that I might see on TV shows or on other podcasts, or that I might follow on social media, because I used to like checking in with your conversation with them, which is obviously really flattering, but also kind of stings, because if I'm truthful, I really love interviewing. I really adore it. It's one of my favourite things to do. I've done it for over 20 years as a journalist and as a podcaster. And I love sitting down and getting to know somebody, or sitting down with somebody and getting to unpick their expertise in a way that I hope will be either helpful and or entertaining for whoever is reading, listening, watching. And it was very reluctantly that I decided to stop doing it, but it felt as though my hand had been forced a little bit. And I think I've spoken about that. And I met lovely Caroline at the Lisa Eldridge launch the other day, and she had said, yes, I've been listening. It's been very interesting. I understand your frustrations. It's clear you've been quite frustrated. And that is true, but there's a whole other side of it that I'm not entirely sure I've really talked about. And I suppose because I'm worried about how it might sound. And that's why I thought, just say it, because if you think about it too much, you won't. So the fact of the matter is one of the reasons, again, why I stopped interviewing experts on the podcast isn't just because of the very many that are out there and want to talk about their expertise, which began to feel very empty. It's because I feel as though my content hopefully it meets you where you are and it guides you to where you want to be, which means I really hope that you stay here for a long time. I hope that there are people who are listening or watching this who've been engaging with the podcast since day one. That would be lovely. But there's also this idea of a little bit like Nanny McPhee, when you don't need me, I'm here. When you do need me, I go away. That's not how it goes in the film. But there are times in my life when I created this podcast as a professional podcaster, when personally I have been going through things that I have then spoken to experts about, which have helped me make progress, and then hopefully have helped to listen and make progress. I don't believe that those subjects, whether it's about mental health, whether it's about weight, whether it's about eating disorders, whatever it might be about, I don't believe that those things are time sensitive. I think they are pretty evergreen. I think that you could tune into an episode and find it incredibly useful, even if it's 7 years old. That's what I feel the Emma Gunn Show as a feed, as a podcast feed, provides. And so it was making me think about another conversation in symmetry with that I'd had this week about newness, because my background is working in beauty journalism, and there is always something new. And if you look at the way that things are marketed, and this is very much a marketing thing, this is about generating an appetite for products and creating a demand that is then supplied, but it's always newness. And I remember when I was working at QVC as a guest presenter, you would have a great sale with a product, And immediately, within 24 hours, you would get the email or you would get the question, can you do it in a supersize? Can you do it in a limited edition? Can you do it in a different flavor, color, whatever it might be? Can you bring us something new? Because it's very easy. Newness always sells. And I will be completely honest with you and say that as a human being, as a consumer in my own right, I think I'm quite like this. And it really spills out into what I am like as a content creator, as a journalist, as a broadcaster, as a podcaster. And that is that I'm not trying to always shove the new thing under your nose. I'm trying to find the thing that I love so that I don't have to keep looking. And so I think that's what the podcast has been about. That's what the subjects have been about. And I think, for example, when I created the series about menopause and about hormonal health and about perimenopause and PCOS, I think I brought you the best of the best. And while there will be advances in those areas, I think that what exists on the feed is still as helpful today as it was when it was created pre-COVID. So, I don't know, 2018, 2019. And I'm really proud of that. And I don't feel the need to keep regurgitating, which was something that I definitely felt fatigued by when I was working on magazines. I felt this sense of, oh, it's January, New Year, New You. Oh, it's February. Let's do red and pink makeup because it's Valentine's Day. Oh, it's, I don't know, party season, desk to dance floor makeup, all of those sorts of nonsense things. But they're sort of tried and tested. They're well trodden and they're easy to churn out. And I suppose in a way I would make my life much easier for myself if I just churned out the same old stuff. But I have always wanted to not churn out the same old stuff and just kind of bring you what I think is amazing and then leave you with it, because it should be about progress. And this podcast should be, I hope it's something that people tune into regularly and think, oh, I'll see what Emma's bleating on about this week, or see who she's talking to, or I see what she's been doing, saying, thinking. But at the same time, I do sort of think the podcast is a place that I've tried to, it's almost like a course of medicine that you need for a while, but at a certain point you will then not need it. And I see so much content out there, particularly in the mental health space, particularly when it comes to things like anxiety and depression, where it's as though the podcast or the content is always about managing the condition rather than making any progress with it. And I don't want to manage a condition. Like if you are struggling with binge eating disorder, I don't want you to manage that. I want you to overcome it and to make progress with it and to find yourself in recovery from it, whilst recovery might not be linear. If you are struggling with weight loss, I want to put the content out there that I think will get you to where you want to be, not that you'll need to keep revisiting, which is why as soon as I discovered the EC method and Emma Story-Gordon and Chloe Madeley and made my own progress and tried to share that both from my own personal experience, but with their expertise in various podcasts that I've created and referring you to their podcast, I think I don't need to keep regurgitating that same content, because that's the content. That's it. That's the one that you need to go back to. That's the reference book that if you need that content, that's what the reference book, dusty and old on the shelves as it might be, that is what you need to listen to. And again, I keep coming back to this and thinking, maybe I should just treat it like a timetable. But I've never been that person who'll do that, who'll repackage something. I'm not a regifter of content. You know, when somebody gets something as a gift, maybe they don't want it, so they wrap it in their own paper and give it to someone else. Like, fair enough, that there's merit in that sometimes, but I don't want to do that with the content. I'm not sure if that's the best example. And so I was just I had my conversation with Evie, who was so excellent that she didn't mind that I had a deep conditioning hair mask on when we were on Zoom, which was very cool of her because I was like, I'm so sorry. The morning's run away with me and I should have been a bit more glamorous, but this is what I look like. I'm wearing a leopard print turban and I've got my hair bandaged up in cling film to try and make this deep conditioning treatment absorb a bit better. And she was fundamentally cool about it. And when I'd done my hair and I was doing my makeup, I was thinking, actually, there's something to be said here with listeners, because it's been so nice for people to actually check in. And as I keep saying in every episode, I have had an email or a DM every day in the last few months since I changed the content and stopped interviewing guests, although guests will appear. But since the guest stopped being the leverage for every episode, I receive a message every single day saying, I actually really like the direction that you're going and keep doing it. And you have no idea how much that means to me. And so as much as I've grumbled about the podcasting space has changed, or I don't want to regurgitate that same thing over and over again, and wanted to share that side of it with you. I feel as though if we've talked about mental health, if we've talked about anxiety, if we've talked about hormone health, if we've talked about binge eating disorder, then we've covered it, and it's there and it's free for you to find, and you can do with it what you will. And by the same token, Evie Pomporis, Chris Voss, you know that I loved those guests. I talk about them all the time. I don't think I can interview them again and do any better. I think that what they came on and said in that moment was brilliant. And I think if you keep inviting people on, sometimes you just dilute it. Don't get me wrong, I understand the entertainment of, oh, I quite like it when that person's talking to that person, because I've sometimes listened to podcasts and thought, oh, I like so-and-so and I like that person, so I'll just listen to them together. And if they do 3 or 4, I think, oh, that'll be good, because I've got previous experience of knowing that it'll be good. But I just don't want, I always try to, when I have guests on, to bring you something really, really meaty and something really helpful, and perhaps something that you didn't expect that you would find on my feed. And so that's another reason. But again, thank you to everybody who has taken the time to message to say, no, keep doing what you're doing. I quite like that it's you. I quite like having you in my ears when I'm on a dog walk, or when I'm doing my housework, or when I'm doing this. You keep me company on my commute. I absolutely love that. So thank you so much. So that's just something I wanted to say, because I suddenly became aware. I thought, have I been grumbling too much? I am annoyed at the way the podcast space has changed, but I'm also a realist and know that it's always going to happen. And I would rather adapt than try to compete. For example, I was offered 2 celebrities in the last fortnight to come on the podcast, so I'd have to read their books, and I thought, no, I declined them. And normally over the last few months when I've had people, I've been like, yeah, send over the thing, I'll have a look at it. And I'm like, no. And I have seen both of those people do numerous television interviews and do numerous big podcasts. So it just kind of confirmed that actually it not would have been a waste of my time, but it would have meant that my podcast would have got lost in all of that. And it was just kind of, I would rather bring somebody to the podcast who has got something interesting to say, regardless of whether they have a book coming out or not, regardless of whether they are on a press tour. I would rather think, do you know what, that person's fascinating, and that will still happen. If I think someone is genuinely fascinating, think, oh, do you know what, I'm going to reach out and see if they want to come on. And that's because that's the way that the show started, and I don't want to change the show just to sort of fit in with what podcasts do, because that's never really been how I've come at content. And I keep coming back to it. I think my life would be a lot easier if it was, because I wouldn't have to think about it as much, and it wouldn't stress me out as much, because I just go, February, right, let's do love, relationship, sex, and intimacy. Boom. And it would be firing off a handful of emails. Has anyone got any experts who can talk about sex, love, intimacy, and great. And then it would be a done deal. But that doesn't feel like bringing you anything particularly authentic. So I wanted to bring you that side of it, because I'm not sure I've really covered that before. And it was lovely to speak to Evie, because she's got this podcast. She's not a big celebrity. She hasn't got millions of followers on social media, but my goodness, has she got good information. My goodness, is she a brilliant source of expertise, and does she know how to get brilliant takeaway from expert guests and scientists. And you just sort of think that's the kind of podcast that I want to platform. That's the kind of content that podcasting was always about in the early days. So again, and you've probably already heard it, there's a pre-recorded thing about that podcast, but if you haven't, I will put a link to that in the show notes. And before I go, as I feel like this is always the shorter episode, and I'm already nearly at 15 minutes, I wanted to talk about something, because I've started talking a little bit more about products. And I know that if you're not watching this on YouTube, you might be like, but I can't see. But you don't need to see necessarily. Just bear it in mind next time you're makeup shopping. I received an email from the Clarins press office this week saying that they were bringing out a full coverage foundation called Skin Illusion. Is that the full? Yeah, Skin Illusion. And truth be told, I am no fan of a full coverage foundation. I find that they flatten my features. They don't make my skin look as nice as I would like, but it's Clarins. And so I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to request a sample. And they said, what size, what shade do you think you are now? If you're on YouTube, I'm going to show you the back of the press release. Those are all the shades. And I didn't have a clue. I sort of put my finger in the middle. But I said, I'm probably somewhere in the neighborhood. And I listed a string of 4 colors. So warm, neutral, and sort of in a particular shade family, thinking that one would arrive. Well, 4 did. And I took a punt and I applied shade 112.5 warm. And whenever I do use a full coverage foundation, I like to apply it with my fingertips because I don't want it full. I feel as though the warmth of my fingertips, the sort of the manipulation of the fingertips into the skin really not only doesn't shear it out, that's the wrong way to say it, but it applies it. I think you can apply it in a more specific dose. And I just want to get close up on YouTube. I am absolutely floored by this. Over the top, I have powder bronzer. I didn't want to put my Reason bronzer over the top because it's a full coverage. I wanted to put a powder over the top because I always think full coverage foundation and then powders. But the light is bouncing off this. It does not look like full coverage on camera. I am so impressed, but it has covered every single thing that I would want covered. So it has covered darkness under my eyes, it has covered the redness around my nose, and it has covered a lot of the discoloration on my chin. So Colour Me Impressed, it's £39. I'll put the link in the show notes and underneath this video. But it comes in 36 shades, and I just think this is for a full coverage, because if a makeup artist once put me in Estee Lauder double wear and I still feel angry about it. Like I can still get myself to like a 9 out of 10 in fury because I looked so washed out and terrible, and I think it was a couple of shades too light. But this also, I guessed my shade family, although they're quite similar, from an online press release, not even the one that I'm showing you that's on paper. And I just think it's really, really lovely because it doesn't flatten. It hasn't made my skin look mask-like. It actually looks quite natural, but because it's on camera, it's also hiding a lot of stuff that I don't want people to see, which is absolutely fantastic. So the only thing that I did was that I then wore this jumper, which I'm hoping hasn't been, I'm about to go and film this jumper because I bought this jumper the other day because I was at appointments. I was having breakfast with lovely Lucy from Elemis in Selfridges at the Brasserie of Light the other day, and Alex Steiner walked in. Alex Steiner, doyenne of makeup and beauty, brilliant beauty editor. I've known her for 20 plus years now, and she's one of the most chic people that you'll ever see in your entire life. And she's just like, she's always just so, she's one of those women who glides. And she was wearing a jumper and I was stroking it saying, this is gorgeous, what kind of cashmere nonsense is this, expecting her to say it was like a £500 cashmere jumper. And she said, it's from H&M. So I immediately went to H&M and bought something. I don't think it's the same one, but it is similar. But I got it in black, and I also got it in this beautiful cream, which is a very risky thing to do if you're wearing quite a lot of makeup. But I actually roughly sort of buffed off the makeup from under my chin. So hopefully it'll be all right, because I'm going to go and film a video of how do I style this cream jumper. What else did I want to mention that I got an email? Somebody said, I was listening to your podcast and you said that you'd done a vlog, and I ran straight over to Instagram and I watched it. Please do more of those. So actually I have started doing vlog just on my phone that will go on Instagram on a Sunday. It might actually replace the Substack column, but probably not. But it's just last weekend was a little bit frantic. But anyway, so I didn't do my column, so there'll be a bumper issue next week. But basically, I've just started doing it. I think it's really fun. And this week it's been quite nice actually, because I filmed going and having a scent discovery experience at Jo Malone London in Covent Garden, which was so much fun. I cannot even tell you. I will do a video on that on Instagram, and I'll probably talk about that on a longer podcast. It's one of the nicest experiences I've ever had as a journalist going to have a press appointment. Now, you don't have to be a journalist to have this appointment, but in terms of not knowing, just having this wonderful customer experience and discovering what it is that I like about scent and what I don't like. It was such a pleasure. I cannot say enough nice things, but obviously at the moment I'm just still gooey about how lovely that experience was. So I'm not articulating it very well. So I need to think about it. And then I'll tell you all of the things about it that I love that I think you might love. But I'm about to hit 20 minutes, and I'm aware that you're probably very busy. So I hope that you have enjoyed this. I hope that it was interesting to hear that perspective. I'm not sure I had shared it as clearly as that before. So maybe it makes sense. There will still be some guests from time to time, but it just has to be the right guest and it has to be for the right reason. But trust me when I tell you, there's over 1,000 episodes of this podcast on this feed. It's going to be 9 in a couple of months. So there are shows and episodes and conversations and topics covered on this feed in over 1,000 episodes that I still stand by, and I don't believe that they need updating. But when the time does come, I obviously will. But I think that there are episodes, and that's the only thing about podcasting that is a shame as well. They're so hard to search. They are so hard to find. If you go into the feed, it's so hard to find. It's not a great search engine. Podcasting, it's not like YouTube, where YouTube gives you tons and tons of results. Podcasting's a little bit harder to navigate, but there are shows in there that are absolutely great. So if you ever do fancy scrolling back, even to 2016, 2017, 2018, there are some humdingers there, like conversations with Jen Sinclair or Gretchen Rubin or Lisa Rinna or Teddy Mellencamp or who else, like Michelle Visage, like really incredible, rich, beautiful conversations that were at a time in podcasting as well where they weren't quite so media sort of mainstream. And so they were a little bit more unpolished and a little bit more raw and a little bit more unexpected, which from my perspective was an absolute joy and a pleasure and an honor to record. But I really love that they're still there for you to find. So please do go and have a search. But if there is anyone or anything that you think, actually, Emma, I would like to hear you have this conversation, then please do let me know. You can email me office@emmaguns.com. You can DM me on Instagram where I'm @emmaguns. You can comment under this video if you're watching on YouTube. You can comment on this podcast if you're listening on Spotify. And the best thing that you could do for me, which would be amazing, is if you could go over to Substack and subscribe. It's free to subscribe, but you can also comment on anything or you can DM me on there as well. But that is where I'm trying to pull quite a lot of the audience, because it does allow me to revisit certain subjects, but it also allows me to bring you new things. And as you know, my background is that I'm a writer, so it makes sense that I am, in addition to video, audio, that I am getting firmly back in the seat behind the desk and doing some writing. Anyway, that's it for this week. Please do get in touch. You know that I love to hear from you. It means such a lot for me. And one of the things that Evie said just before I go is that sometimes when you're creating a podcast, it's not like an Instagram post where someone likes it or you see how many people have viewed it. It's not like a YouTube video where you see how many people have viewed it. With podcasting, you can put a show out into the world and you just never know if anyone's listened to it. And that's something I've been very used to in nearly 9 years of doing this. And when I spoke to Evie, she said, oh, so many people have said that they've heard me on your show. They've heard what you've said about my show. And I thought, oh God, that's really nice. So people are listening. So it's so nice is what I'm trying to say, when people just kind of take the time to send a message and get in touch or subscribe to Substack from the show, and just because it just lets me know that you're there. And I want to create this show for you. So if you let me know what you want, I will create it. Anyway, I really will go now, and I have to go and film that video showing how I style up this cream jumper, which hopefully isn't covered in makeup. But my God, what a foundation. So impressed with it. Anyway, all of the links will be in the show notes. But thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I will see you on the next one.